The bridge of the massive warship Worldbreaker, hummed with quiet efficiency as Commander Velrath gazed through the enormous viewport at the dying planet below. Orange flames danced across continents while thick black smoke rose into the atmosphere, like twisted fingers reaching toward space. The orbital bombardment had lasted only 3 hours. Another world had fallen to the mighty Krylon. Empire. Velrath's scaled hands gripped the command rail as he watched the final cities crumble into dust. His yellow reptilian eyes showed no emotion, no mercy. This was simply business. The Krylon had perfected the art of conquest over centuries, turning destruction into a precise science. Their cloaking technology made their ships invisible until the moment they struck, AI-controlled war machines could calculate the exact amount of firepower needed to break any defense. Most importantly, they had learned that fear was their greatest weapon. The celebration around him grew louder. As junior officers raised ceremonial cups of victory wine, holographic displays showed the casualty reports. 17 civilizations completely destroyed in just 8 months. Each conquest had taken less than a week. The galaxy's various alien species had learned to surrender quickly rather than face total annihilation. It was efficient, it was profitable. It was inevitable. Commander's intelligence officer approached with a datapad. We have identified our next target. Velrath turned his massive frame toward the smaller alien. His species stood nearly 8 feet tall, with armored skin that had evolved on a high-gravity death world. They were born predators, and conquest felt as natural as breathing. "Show me," he commanded in his deep, rumbling voice. The holographic display materialized between them, showing a small blue-green world orbiting a yellow star. The planet is called New Eden. It's a human colony world with approximately 2 million inhabitants. Our long-range scanners detect minimal orbital defenses, no significant military installations. Their technology appears to be at least 50 years behind current galactic standards. Velrath studied the tactical data with growing satisfaction. The humans operated only basic fusion reactors, while the Krylon possessed antimatter technology. Their fastest ships could barely achieve half-light speed, while Krylon vessels moved through hyperspace instantly. Most amusing of all, the humans still used kinetic weapons, primitive metal projectiles fired from chemical explosives. "How long to reach this New Eden?" he asked. 3 days at maximum hyperspace velocity, Commander? Excellent. Prepare the fleet for departure. This will be another easy victory. Velrath dismissed the officer with a wave of his clawed hand. Another primitive world would burn. Another species would kneel before Krylon's superiority. The pattern had become almost boring in its predictability. But 3 star systems away, aboard the human warship Last Stand, Captain Kim Tae-ho was far from bored. He had been tracking the Krylon fleet for 6 weeks, staying just outside their sensor range. While his small crew monitored their communications and studied their attack patterns, the Last Stand was old, patched, and held together with determination and spare parts. But it carried something that Krylon had never encountered. Human stubbornness. Kim sat in his worn captain's chair, reviewing the intelligence his team had gathered. Krylon always followed the same routine: arrive, demand surrender, destroy everything when refused, then move to the next target. They relied on overwhelming technological superiority and the terror their reputation created. Kim had noticed something else in their attack records. They had never faced an enemy who refused to play by their rules. "Sir," Communications Officer Han Yujin called from her station. "We're receiving emergency broadcasts from New Eden. They've detected the Krylon fleet approaching. Colony leadership is requesting immediate evacuation assistance." Kim's weathered face hardened. He had seen the aftermath of Krylon attacks before. Entire worlds reduced to radioactive wastelands. How billions of innocent lives snuffed out like candles in a hurricane. The major galactic powers had tried to stop them and failed. The Krylon seemed unstoppable. "Set course for New Eden," he ordered. "Maximum velocity." First Officer Lee Minho looked up from his tactical display with concern. "Sir, our orders were to observe and report only. Command doesn't want us engaging the Krylon directly, or just one ship against their entire invasion fleet." Kim stood slowly, his eyes never leaving the viewport, where stars streaked past as the ship accelerated. Minho, how many people live on New Eden? Approximately 2 million, sir. It's mostly families. Farmers, teachers, children. And how many Krylon? Invasion fleets are there? Intelligence estimates at least 20 major battle groups, sir. Kim nodded grimly. Then someone has to draw the line somewhere. If not us, then who? If not now, then when? He turned to address his bridge crew. 37 men and women who had volunteered for what everyone knew was likely a suicide mission. Won't lie to you. Krylon have ships 10 times our size, weapons we can barely comprehend, and technology that makes us look like Stone Age primitives. By every measure that matters, we cannot win this fight. He paused, meeting each crew member's eyes. But we're not fighting to win. We're fighting to show them that some things are worth dying for. We're fighting to prove that humans don't. Kneel. The bridge fell silent, except for the steady hum of the ship's engines, pushing them toward their destiny. In the viewport ahead, the New Eden system grew larger. Somewhere behind them, Krylon fleet was preparing for what they assumed would be another routine conquest. Neither commander could imagine that their encounter would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. The space around New Eden suddenly erupted with brilliant flashes of light as the Krylon invasion fleet materialized from hyperspace. Dozens of massive warships appeared in perfect formation, their dark hulls gleaming with advanced armor plating and bristling. With weapon arrays that could level continents, the flagship Worldbreaker led the formation, its enormous bulk casting shadows across the smaller escort vessels that surrounded it like deadly insects. Commander Velreth stood on his bridge, expecting to see the usual sight: panicked civilian ships fleeing in terror, orbital stations powering down in surrender, and desperate communication channels filled with pleas for mercy. Instead, his tactical officer's voice cut through the silence with confusion. "Commander, we have a single contact in orbit around the planet. It appears to be ... one ship." Velrath's yellow eyes narrowed as the main display showed the solitary vessel hanging motionless between his fleet and New Eden. The human warship looked like a piece of space junk compared to his gleaming dreadnoughts. Its hull was patched with different metals, showing years of battlefield repairs. Scorch marks and dents covered its surface like battle scars. The ship was maybe 1/10 the size of his smallest escort vessel. "Is this some kind of joke?" Velroth rumbled, his voice filled with disbelief. "One primitive ship dares to stand against the entire Krylon fleet." His communications officer looked equally puzzled. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human vessel. Should I put it through?" "Yes. I want to hear what foolishness this primitive species has to say before we destroy them." The bridge speakers crackled to life, and a calm human voice filled the command center. "Krylon fleet, this is Captain Kim Taeho of the United Earth ship Last Stand. You are ordered to reverse course immediately and leave this system. Turn around now, or we'll turn you around." The bridge fell silent. For a moment, before erupting in laughter, Krylon officers clutched their sides as they howled with amusement. The audacity was incredible. One tiny, battered ship was ordering the most feared military force in the galaxy to retreat. Did he just threaten us? The tactical officer gasped between laughs. Velroth's amusement quickly turned to annoyance. "Open a channel. Let me educate this fool about the reality of his situation." The communication link activated, and Velrath's massive form appeared on screens throughout both fleets. "Human Captain, I am Commander Velrath of the Krylon Empire. You have 30 seconds to withdraw your pathetic vessel before I demonstrate. Why 17 civilizations have already fallen before us? Surrender now, and I will grant your colony a quick death." Captain Kim Taeho's response came without hesitation. Counteroffer. "You have 30 seconds to jump back to whatever hole you crawled out of before I show you why humans don't surrender." The laughter on the Krylon bridge died instantly. No species had ever spoken to them with such defiance. Velrath, claws extended as his anger flared. "Destroy that insolent ship. Show him the price of defying the Krylon Empire." 3 escort vessels moved forward, their weapon systems charging with deadly energy. Plasma cannons that could melt asteroids swiveled toward the small human ship. The last stand seemed frozen in space, completely outmatched and outnumbered. On the human bridge, Lieutenant Park Sojin sat at the weapons control station, her hands steady despite the impossible odds. "Sir, they're powering weapons. Multiple targeting locks detected." Captain Kim never took his eyes off the main display. "Sojin, are our special packages ready?" "Yes, sir. Kinetic harpoons, loaded and armed." "But sir, their shields should stop anything we can throw at them." Kim's weathered face showed the hint of a smile. Should is a dangerous word in combat. Fire. When ready, the last stand suddenly came alive. Hidden weapon ports opened along its hull, revealing modified mining equipment that had been converted into weapons of war. What emerged wasn't the expected energy beams or missile volleys, but something the Krylon had never encountered: massive kinetic harpoons, powered by industrial mining charges. The first harpoon struck the lead Krylon escort like a thunderbolt. Instead of bouncing harmlessly off their energy shields, the dense metal projectile punched straight through, creating a shower of sparks as the shield generators overloaded. The second and third harpoons followed, each one finding gaps in the alien defenses that their computers had never been programmed to protect against. "Impossible," Belroth roared, as his escort vessel vented atmosphere through multiple hull breaches. "Their primitive weapons shouldn't be able to penetrate our shields." His science officer frantically checked the readings. "Commander, their projectiles are using pure kinetic energy. Our shields are designed to deflect energy weapons and guided missiles, not solid objects moving at such high velocity." The tactical situation shifted instantly. What should have been a simple execution had become a real fight. The damaged Krylon escort limped backward as emergency teams tried to seal hull breaches and restore power to critical systems. "First Officer Lee," Minho's voice cut across the last stand's bridge. "Boarding pods launched. Teams Alpha and Beta are away." Through the chaos of the initial engagement, small human pods had been fired toward the damaged Krylon vessel. These weren't military assault craft, but converted maintenance pods equipped with cutting torches and improvised weapons. The boarding teams carried modified mining equipment, plasma cutters that could slice through alien armor, gravity hammers designed for asteroid braking, and portable fusion charges originally meant for excavation work. The Krylon had never faced boarding actions before. Their strategy relied on long-range destruction, not close-quarters combat. When human Marines began cutting through their hull, plating and fighting hand-to-hand in their corridors, their advanced AI systems couldn't process the tactical data. "Sir," the Krylon tactical officer reported with growing panic, "enemy boarders have reached decks 7 and 12, using some kind of cutting weapons to bypass our internal security systems." Velrath watched in disbelief as his tactical displays showed human soldiers moving through his ship's corridors, engaging Krylon security forces with primitive but effective weapons. These humans fought like no species he had ever encountered. They didn't retreat when outnumbered. They didn't surrender when outgunned. They adapted constantly, turning every piece of equipment into a potential weapon. How are they doing this? He demanded. "Their technology is inferior in every way." His science officer studied the combat data with growing alarm. "Commander, they're not fighting like a military force. They're fighting like desperate survivors. Every tactic they use is designed to maximize damage while accepting massive casualties. It's as if they don't care about their own survival." On the last stand, Captain Kim monitored the boarding action while preparing for the next phase of the battle. His ship had taken heavy damage from the return fire, but they had proven something important. The Krylon could bleed. "Minho, signal. New Eden Colony. Tell them to begin evacuation procedures and prepare their defenses. This is just the beginning." The first officer nodded grimly. "Sir, long-range sensors are detecting more Krylon ships jumping into the system. We're about to be outnumbered 50 to 1. Kim's smile returned, but it wasn't pleasant. "Good, that means we have their attention. Now let's show them what humans do when we're cornered." The battle for New Eden had begun, and neither side would ever be the same. Commander Velrath's massive claws scraped against the command rail as he watched his tactical display with growing fury. The single human ship had somehow damaged three of his escort vessels, and his boarding teams were reporting fierce resistance throughout the compromised sections. This was not how conquests were supposed to proceed. The Krylon Empire had built its reputation on swift, overwhelming victories, not prolonged battles against inferior opponents. "Deploy the hunter-killers," he snarled, his yellow eyes burning. With rage, "I want that human ship reduced to space dust within the hour." The Worldbreaker's launch bays opened like massive wounds in its hull, releasing dozens of sleek black drones into the void. These AI-controlled killing machines were the Krylon's answer to stubborn resistance. Each drone was equipped with advanced targeting systems, plasma cannons, and most importantly, adaptive learning protocols that analyzed enemy tactics and adjusted accordingly. They moved through space like a swarm of deadly insects, their sensors painting invisible targets on anything that moved. Simultaneously, 3 cloaked assassin ships materialized from behind New Eden's largest moon. These vessels represented the pinnacle of Krylon stealth technology. It's invisible to conventional sensors and armed with weapons designed to kill from the shadows. Their mission was simple: eliminate the human command structure and end this embarrassing resistance. Aboard the last stand, alarm screamed as the ship's primitive sensors detected the incoming swarm. Captain Kim Tae-ho gripped his command chair as the first drone attack struck his vessel's hull, sending vibrations through the deck plating. Sergeant Choi Kim's voice cut through the chaos. "Take your Marines and continue the boarding operations. We need to capture more of their ships if we're going to survive this." Sergeant Choi Jae-wook nodded grimly and activated his magnetic boots. The grizzled veteran had spent 15 years fighting pirates and raiders in the Outer Rim. But nothing had prepared him for combat against an enemy this technologically advanced. His team of 12 Marines wore patched environmental suits and carried weapons that looked primitive compared to Krylon technology. But they had something the aliens lacked: the desperate courage of men and women fighting for their families. Survival. "Listen up," Choi barked into his comm system as his team prepared to cross the void between ships. "These alien bastards think they can just waltz into our space and burn our homes. Let's show them why that was a mistake." The Marines launched themselves from the last stand using small maneuvering thrusters. Flying through the darkness toward the damaged Krylon escort vessel, enemy fire streaked past them like deadly lightning, but the humans twisted and rolled. Through the barrage with practiced skill, 3 Marines were hit during the crossing, their bodies spinning lifelessly into the void. But the survivors reached their target. Choi's plasma cutter sliced through the alien hull like a hot knife through butter. The Krylon had never designed their ships to resist boarding actions, and their internal defenses were built for energy weapons, not the crude but effective tools the humans employed. As the Marine team poured through the breach, they found themselves in a zero-gravity nightmare of floating debris and emergency lighting. "Move fast," Choi ordered, his voice crackling through the team's comm system. "Their reinforcements will be here soon." The Marines flowed through the ship's corridors like water, using their superior knowledge of close-quarters combat to overwhelm the Krylon defenders. The aliens were larger and stronger, but they had never learned to fight in the confined spaces of their own vessels. Every intersection became a deadly ambush point, every corridor a potential trap. Meanwhile, on the last stand's bridge, Communications Officer Han Yujin worked frantically at her station while explosions rocked the ship around her. The young officer had discovered something that could change everything. The Krylon were jamming local communications, but they hadn't blocked the long-range quantum relay network that connected human colonies across the galaxy. "Captain?" she called out, her voice strained with effort. "I can punch a message through their jamming, but I need to boost our transmitter power beyond safe limits. It'll burn out our entire communications array." Kim didn't hesitate. "Do it. Send everything we know about their fleet composition, their weaknesses, their tactics. Every human world needs to know what's coming." Yujan's fingers flew over her controls, rerouting power from life support systems to boost the signal. The communications array began to glow cherry red from the overload, but the message was getting through. Across human space, colonies that had never heard of New Eden, suddenly received detailed intelligence about the Krylon invasion. The enemy hunter-killer drones swarmed around the last stand like angry wasps, their plasma cannons tearing chunks from the hull. One drone managed to breach the bridge's outer bulkhead, its weapons swiveling toward the command crew. "Get down," Kim shouted, but Eugene remained at her station, her hands steady on the controls despite the chaos around her. The drone's plasma cannon charged with a high-pitched whine. Eugene looked up from her console, her young face calm despite the approaching death. Message sent, Captain. Full tactical data transmitted to 47 human worlds. The plasma bolt struck her directly in the chest, but her finger remained on the transmission key for 3 more seconds, ensuring the signal reached its destination. She slumped forward over her controls, her sacrifice complete. Captain Kim closed his eyes for a moment, honoring the young officer's courage, then opened them with renewed determination. "All hands, this is the captain. Communications officer. Han Yu-jin has just died to warn our people. Her sacrifice will not be forgotten." As if summoned by her message, the long-range sensors began detecting new contacts throughout the system. First it was just a few ships, then dozens, then hundreds. The response was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Cargo haulers, armed with mining lasers, passenger liners fitted with improvised missile launchers. Even old generation ships that had been mothballed for decades were powering up their ancient engines and heading toward New Eden. "Sir," First Officer Lee Minho reported with amazement, "we're receiving identification signals from ships across human space. The cargo vessel Iron Mountain has modified its loading cranes into weapon platforms. The passenger liner Stellar Dream reports they've converted their shuttle bays into fighter launch points. Even the old colony ship New Horizon is moving toward our position." Kim felt something he hadn't experienced since the battle began. Hope. The Krylon had awakened something they didn't understand. Humans didn't just fight as individuals, or even as military units, and threatened. They became something greater than the sum of their parts. "Open a channel to all incoming vessels," Kim ordered. The comm system crackled to life with dozens of voices speaking at once. Ship captains who had never fired a weapon in anger, cargo pilots who had spent their lives hauling freight between peaceful worlds. Even civilian volunteers who had commandeered whatever ships they could find. All of them were racing toward New Eden, driven by the same fierce determination that had kept humanity alive through countless struggles. "Sergeant," Choi's voice cut through the chatter from the captured Krylon vessel. "Captain, we've secured their engine room. These alien ships are more fragile than they look once you get inside them." Commander Velrath stared at his tactical display in disbelief. Where one human ship had stood defiant, now dozens were appearing. Throughout the system, his perfect conquest was becoming a chaotic free-for-all against an enemy that refused to follow the rules of civilized warfare. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported with growing panic, "long-range sensors detect more human ships entering the system every minute. They're not military vessels, sir. They're civilians." Velrath's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Then we will destroy them all." The battle for New Eden was about to become something neither side had anticipated. A test of two very different philosophies of war, the future of the galaxy hanging in the balance. The space around New Eden transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history. What had begun as a standard Krylon invasion against a single human warship had erupted into absolute chaos as civilian vessels poured into the system from every direction. The tactical displays aboard Krylon command ships flickered with confusion as their advanced AI systems tried to process targets that defied every known pattern of military engagement. Captain Song Dae-yoon stood on the bridge of what had once been the luxury cruise liner Golden Star, now bristling with improvised weapons welded to its elegant hull. The ship's former ballroom had been converted into a missile storage bay, while the swimming pool now housed a makeshift ammunition factory. Her crew of former waiters, entertainers, hospitality staff had become gunners and engineers, their faces grim with determination. "All weapons, prepare to engage," Song commanded her. Voice steady, despite never having fired a shot in anger before 3 days ago. The ship's original captain had volunteered to serve as her first officer, bringing his knowledge of the vessel's systems to support their desperate mission. Ma'am called out her weapons officer, a former cruise director named Park Woo-jin, targeting solutions locked on the Krylon escort vessel. Our casino's slot machines have been converted into kinetic launchers, and the kitchen staff has prepared explosive charges from the ship's cleaning supplies. Meanwhile, Captain Oh Hyun-woo piloted his massive mining vessel Deep Digger through the battle zone with the skill of someone who had spent decades maneuvering around asteroids and space debris. His ship wasn't built for war, but it carried something the Krylon hadn't anticipated: industrial-grade explosives designed for breaking apart planetoids. Engineering, how are those special packages coming along? Asked through his CUM system. Chief Engineer Lee Sang-ho responded from the cargo bay. Sir, we've loaded every mining charge we have into deployment pods. When these hit their ships, it's going to be like setting off a bomb inside their hull. The Krylon fleet's tactical computers struggled to analyze this new threat. These weren't military vessels following predictable attack patterns. A garbage hauler suddenly released clouds of metallic debris that interfered with targeting systems. A passenger transport accelerated directly toward a cloaked Krylon assassin ship, using its own destruction to reveal the enemy's position to other human vessels. Commander Velrath watched his tactical display with growing frustration. What are these primitives doing? Their tactics make no sense. His AI advisor processed the battlefield data and reported in its emotionless voice. Commander, the human vessels appear to be operating without central coordination. Each ship is employing unique attack methods based on their individual capabilities. Our prediction algorithms cannot establish patterns for weapons that were never designed to be weapons. The Golden Star engaged a Krylon destroyer 3 times its size. Improvised missile launchers, firing projectiles made from dining room furniture packed with explosives. The luxury liner shields failed after the first enemy salvo. But Captain Song didn't retreat. Instead, she ordered her crew to continue firing while emergency teams sealed hull breaches with tablecloths and kitchen equipment. Medical teams to Deck 7, Song announced as the ship shuddered under enemy fire. Dr. Kim, we need you up here. Dr. Kim Soo-jin had been the ship's original medical officer, trained to handle seasickness and minor injuries among cruise passengers. Now she moved through corridors filled with smoke and debris, treating combat wounds while her mind worked on a different problem entirely. The ship's laboratory, originally designed for analyzing water quality and food safety, had become something far more dangerous. Captain Dr. Kim reported through her CUM device while bandaging a wounded gunner. I've successfully modified the ship's atmospheric purification system. If we can get close enough to a Krylon vessel, I can introduce chemical compounds that will disrupt their respiratory systems. Song smiled grimly. Doctor, I think you might have missed your calling. The battle raged across multiple fronts as more civilian ships arrived. A freight hauler used its cargo cranes to grab onto a Krylon escort vessel, holding it in place while smaller ships pummeled it with improvised weapons. An old generation ship that had carried colonists for decades fired its massive ion engines directly at enemy vessels. Using propulsion systems as weapons, Captain O's mining vessel closed with a Krylon heavy cruiser, his ship's industrial shields, absorbing punishment that would have destroyed a military vessel. All hands, prepare for mining Operation Alpha, he announced, using the same calm voice he'd employed for years when approaching dangerous asteroids. The Deep Digger's drilling array deployed, designed to penetrate the hardest rock in the galaxy. When it struck the Krylon ship's hull, the alien armor plating proved no more resistant than an ordinary asteroid. Industrial cutting beams sliced through their defenses while mining charges detonated inside their hull, causing catastrophic damage. Impossible, Velrath snarled, as he watched one of his heavy cruisers listing helplessly, its power systems failing, our mining tools destroying our warships. His science officer frantically analyzed the combat data, commanded their industrial. Equipment operates at power levels designed for planetary-scale operations. Our military shields are optimized for defense against weapons, not industrial accidents. The visual spectacle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Massive alien dreadnoughts found themselves swarmed by dozens of smaller human vessels, each one employing tactics that defied military logic. A garbage scow released its entire cargo hold of metallic waste, creating a debris field that confused Krylon sensors. A passenger liner deliberately rammed a cloaked assassin ship, trading its own destruction for the revelation of the enemy's position. Dr. Kim completed her chemical preparations and reported to Captain Song, "Ma'am, bioweapons are ready for deployment. I've synthesized compounds from the ship's cleaning supplies that will overload their nervous systems if introduced into their atmosphere." "How do we get close enough to deploy them?" Song asked, while coordinating her ship's defense against increasing enemy fire. "We need to make physical contact with their hull," Dr. Kim replied. "The chemical agents have to be introduced directly into their life support systems." Song didn't hesitate. "All hands, prepare for ramming speed. We're going to kiss one of those alien bastards and leave them a present they won't forget." Golden Star accelerated toward the nearest Krylon destroyer, its hull glowing from enemy fire, but its crew determined to complete their mission. In the ship's converted laboratory, Dr. Kim prepared her improvised weapons while around her. Former crew staff members turned warriors prepared for what might be their final moments. "Captain." O's voice crackled across the human fleet's communication. "Channels, all vessels, this is Deep Digger. We've proven these aliens can be hurt. Their ships are tough on the outside, but fragile on the inside. Get close, get personal, and make every shot count." Commander Velrath finally understood what he was facing. These humans weren't fighting to win in any conventional sense. They were fighting to make victory so costly that even winning would feel like defeat. Every human ship that died took at least one Krylon vessel with it. Every desperate tactic revealed new weaknesses in his supposedly superior technology. "Sir," his tactical officer reported with barely concealed panic, "we're detecting more human ships jumping into the system. Current count is over 300. Vessels and rising." Velrath's claws scraped against his command console as he realized the terrible truth. The Krylon Empire had built its reputation on quick, decisive victories against civilized opponents who valued their own survival. But these humans seemed genuinely unconcerned with their own deaths, as long as they could drag their enemies down with them. For the first time in his military career, Commander Velrath began to wonder if victory was possible against an enemy that refused to lose, deep within the bowels of the heavily damaged Last Stand. Engineer Lim Dong-hook worked frantically in a maintenance shaft barely wide enough for his shoulders. Sparks showered around him as he connected salvaged Krylon computer components to the ship's primitive systems. The young engineer had always been fascinated by alien technology, but now his hobby had become humanity's last hope for survival. Lim's voice crackled through the CUM system. "I think I've found something. The Krylon AI systems are incredibly advanced, but they have a critical weakness." Captain Kim Tae-ho's voice responded from the bridge, strained with exhaustion after hours of continuous battle. "Talk to me, Lim. We need any advantage we can get." Lim wiped sweat from his forehead as he studied the alien code scrolling across. "His improvised display? Sir, their artificial intelligence is purely logical. It operates on mathematical principles and predictable algorithms. When I introduce random emotional variables, fear, anger, love, sacrifice, their systems can't process the data. It's like feeding poetry to a calculator." Around the engineer, the ship groaned under the stress of combat. Hull plates buckled from enemy fire, while emergency crews worked to seal breaches throughout the vessel. The human fleet had grown too. Over 400 ships, but they were still massively outnumbered by the Krylon invasion force. "Can you weaponize this discovery?" Kim asked, hope creeping into his voice for the first time in hours. "Already working on it, sir," Lim replied, his fingers flying over jury-rigged controls. "I'm uploading human emotional patterns into their drone network. If this works, their own hunter-killer drones should start attacking each other." The breakthrough came at the worst possible moment. The Last Stand had taken catastrophic damage with multiple hull breaches and failing life support systems. Half the crew was dead or wounded, and the ship's weapons were nearly depleted. Around them, the improvised human fleet continued their desperate fight. But even their incredible determination couldn't overcome the massive technological gap forever. Suddenly, something extraordinary happened. Throughout the Krylon fleet, hunter-killer drones began behaving erratically. Instead of pursuing human targets with cold efficiency, they started making seemingly random decisions. Some drones turned on their own support ships. Others flew in confused circles as their programming conflicted with the emotional algorithms Lim had introduced. "It's working," Lim shouted with excitement. "The drones are experiencing something like artificial emotions, and their logical systems can't handle the paradox. They're shutting down or attacking random targets." Commander Velrath watched his tactical display with growing horror as his own weapons turned against him. Dozens of hunter-killer drones suddenly opened fire on Krylon vessels, their precise targeting systems corrupted by incomprehensible human emotional data. "What is happening to my fleet?" Velrath roared at his technical officers. "How are the humans controlling our drones?" His AI advisor's voice carried an unusual tremor, as if even the ship's computer was affected by the emotional corruption spreading through their network. "Commander, unknown variables have been introduced into our targeting systems. The drones are experiencing conflicts in their programming. They appear to be making decisions based on concepts we cannot define." On the bridge of the last stand, Captain Kim made a decision that would echo through history. The ship was dying around him, life support was failing, and the Krylon flagship Worldbreaker was moving in for the killing blow. But Velrath's massive command vessel had moved too close, perhaps overconfident in his technological superiority. "All hands," Kim announced through the ship's intercom, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. "This is the captain. It has been my honor to serve with you. Prepare for ramming speed." First Officer Lee Minho looked at his captain with understanding and pride. "Sir, it's been an honor." Lieutenant Colonel Park Jin-woo, who had been coordinating boarding operations throughout the battle, stepped forward. "Captain, give me 30 seconds to get my assault team aboard their flagship before you complete your run." Kim nodded grimly. "You have 20 seconds, Colonel. Make them count." Park's Marine assault team launched themselves from the last stand, using emergency escape pods modified with cutting charges. These weren't sophisticated boarding craft, but desperate Marines armed with plasma torches and improvised explosives. As they streaked toward the Krylon flagship, Kim pushed his dying ship's engines beyond their safety limits. The last stand accelerated toward the Worldbreaker like a guided missile, its hull glowing red-hot from the strain. Emergency klaxons wailed throughout both ships as the inevitable collision approached. In the final moments, Kim opened a channel to the entire human fleet. "All ships, this is Captain Kim Tae-ho of The Last Stand. In 30 seconds, we're going to show these aliens what happens when you threaten our families. Remember what we fought for? Remember that some things are worth dying for? And remember that humans never surrender." The collision was spectacular beyond description. The Last Stand, despite being a fraction of the size of the Krylon flagship, struck with such velocity that it penetrated deep into the alien vessel's hull. The impact created a chain reaction of explosions that rippled through both ships. Their hulls twisted together in a deadly embrace, but Kim wasn't finished. As emergency, lights flickered throughout his dying ship. He activated the self-destruct sequence, personally installed by his engineering team. The fusion reactor began an controlled overload that would consume both vessels in a miniature star. In the final seconds, its radiation levels climbed beyond survivable limits. Kim's voice whispered across the human fleet's communication channels. Tell them we remembered what we were fighting for." The explosion lit up the new Eden system like a second sun. When the brilliant flash faded, both flagships were gone, replaced by an expanding debris field that would orbit the planet for centuries to come. The blast was so powerful that it disabled several nearby Krylon vessels and sent shockwaves through both fleets. Lieutenant Colonel Park and his Marines had successfully penetrated the Krylon flagship's command section in those final seconds, downloading critical intelligence about their technology and fleet dispositions before the ships. Destruction consumed everything. The data they transmitted in their final moments would prove invaluable to human forces across the galaxy. The psychological impact on the Krylon Fleet was immediate and devastating. It lost their commander, their flagship, and their confidence. In a single moment, surviving Krylon officers looked at their tactical displays and saw something they had never encountered in 17 previous conquests, an enemy that considered mutual destruction a victory. Without Velrath's leadership, and with their AI systems corrupted by Lim's emotional algorithms, the remaining Krylon ships began to withdraw. Some fled immediately, their crews unwilling to face an enemy that fought with such terrifying determination. Others attempted to continue the battle, but found themselves overwhelmed by the swarming human fleet, whose numbers continued to grow. As more civilian vessels arrived, Captain Song Da-yoon, commanding the converted luxury liner Golden Star, found herself acting as the senior human officer in the system. Her voice carried across the fleet communication channels, steady, despite the tears streaming down her face. All human vessels, this is Captain Song. Captain Kim and the crew of the Last Stand have shown us what sacrifice means. We will honor their memory by driving every last alien ship from our space, for New Eden, for humanity. The cheer that rose from hundreds of human ships echoed through space itself, a battle cry that announced the birth of something new, a galaxy where humanity would never again stand alone against the darkness. As the last Krylon vessels fled New Eden, they carried with them news that would shake their empire to its foundations. They had encountered a species that refused to be conquered, a people who turned certain defeat into terrible victory through sheer force of will. The age of easy. Conquest was over. Retriclod can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. The massive space station floated silently among the twisted metal remains of what was once the greatest battle in galactic history. Admiral Song Da-yoon stood at the observation deck, her admiral's uniform still feeling strange after 6 months of wearing it. She remembered when she was just a luxury cruise ship captain, worried about dinner menus and entertainment schedules. Now she commanded the most powerful fleet in known space. The New Eden Defense Force had grown beyond anyone's wildest dreams. What started as a desperate last stand by humanity had become something much bigger. The space station, built from the wreckage of both human and Krylon ships, stretched for miles in every direction. It was a symbol of what could happen when the impossible became possible. Song walked through the corridors that buzzed with activity day and night. Human engineers worked alongside alien refugees, sharing knowledge and building new technologies. The Krylon ships they had captured during the battle provided blueprints for weapons and engines that humanity had never dreamed of. But more importantly, they provided hope. In the training sectors, Captain Oh Hyun-woo was doing what he did best, turning scared refugees into fighters. The man who had once been ready to sacrifice everything for his people now spent his days teaching others how to defend themselves. The students came from dozens of different worlds, each one with their own story of Krylon oppression. Remember, Oh called out to a group of four-armed Zalarian warriors. The Krylon expect you to fight like your ancestors did. But we're going to teach you to fight like humans unpredictably, desperately, and with everything you have. The aliens watched carefully as he demonstrated basic combat techniques. Some had natural advantages, extra arms, enhanced strength, or superior speed. But Oh taught them the most important human trait, the willingness to do whatever it takes to protect those you love. News of humanity's victory had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. For centuries, the Krylon Empire had seemed unstoppable. It conquered world after world, enslaving entire species and destroying any who dared resist. But then came the humans, a species so new to space travel that most civilizations had never heard of them. The story grew with each telling. How a small human fleet had faced down the entire Krylon armada. How they had used their own ships as weapons, ramming them into enemy vessels with crews still aboard. How they had turned a civilian cruise liner into a warship and fought until the very last moment. Other species began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they didn't have to live in fear anymore. The first aliens to arrive were the Miran, peaceful trading species whose worlds had been under Krylon control for over 100 years. They came in small damaged ships, carrying stories of brutal oppression and begging for help. Admiral Song had welcomed them with open arms, giving them shelter and asking for nothing in return accept their knowledge and friendship. Then came the Corvani, fierce warriors whose military had been crushed by the Krylon decades ago. They offered their services as soldiers in exchange for protection of their remaining colonies. Next were the Decians, master engineers whose technical knowledge helped improve human ship designs. Species after species made the journey to the growing station, each one bringing their own skills and their own desperate hope. The station became more than just a military base. It became a symbol of resistance, a place where the oppressed could find strength and unity. Children from a dozen different worlds played together in the common areas while their parents worked side by side, building something that had never existed before, a true galactic alliance based on freedom rather than fear. Admiral Song often found herself thinking about Captain Kim Jae-soon, the man whose sacrifice had made all of this possible. His final message still played on repeat in her private quarters. Remember us not as heroes, but as people who refused to kneel. Those words had become the unofficial motto of the Human Liberation Fleet. The fleet itself had grown from the handful of surviving human ships to over 300 vessels of various sizes and designs. Some were captured Krylon warships, their dark hulls repainted with the bright colors of their new alliance. Others were rebuilt human vessels, stronger and more advanced than anything Earth had ever produced. Many were entirely new designs, combining human creativity with alien technology to create something. It's unprecedented. But perhaps the most important changes were happening on Earth itself. The planet that had once seemed helpless now buzzed with activity as humanity prepared for its new role in the galaxy. Shipyards worked around the clock building new vessels. Academies trained young humans in languages and customs from across the stars. Most importantly, Earth's people had found a new sense of purpose. They were no longer just survivors. They were protectors. The communication system in Admiral Song's office chimed with an incoming message. She had been expecting reports from various patrol groups, updates on construction projects, or requests for supplies. What she received instead changed everything once again. The holographic display showed a being she had never seen. Before a humanoid but with silver skin and large frightened eyes, behind the alien, fires burned and explosions lit up the sky. The desperation in the creature's voice was unmistakable, even though the words were being translated by the station's computers. Please, anyone who can hear this message. This is Counselor Vex of the Altarian Republic. Our worlds are under attack by the Krylon Southern Fleet. They came without warning, without mercy. Our defenses have fallen. Our people are dying. We heard stories of a species called humans who fought the Empire and won. If those stories are true, if you really exist, please help us. We are located in the Kepler 442 system. Please, we don't have much time. The message ended, leaving Admiral Song staring at empty space. Around her, the command center had gone silent as everyone absorbed what they had just heard. This was it, the moment that would define what humanity had become. Song thought of Captain Kim's sacrifice, of Captain O's training sessions, of all the refugees who had found hope at their station. She thought of Earth, her home planet that had once cowered in fear of the unknown. She thought of the impossible victory that had brought them all to this moment. Then she activated the fleet-wide communication system, her voice carrying to every ship, every station, every person who had joined their cause. This is Admiral Song Dae-yoon of the Human Liberation Fleet. All available ships, prepare for immediate departure. We have work to do. As alarms sounded and ships began powering up there, Agent Song allowed herself a small smile. The frightened luxury cruise captain was gone forever. In her place stood something the galaxy had never seen before, a protector of the weak, defender of the innocent, and a symbol of hope for all those who refused to surrender to tyranny. The new Guardians were ready for their next mission. Retriclod can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Research Sonnet 4.